In art, we often seek the artist's breath and the lingering traces of their inner struggle. We tend to find a human connection in the raw brushstrokes and the tactile density of accumulated paint. However, within the citadel of William Adolphe Bouguereau, such expectations are utterly dismantled. For his canvas is a world of vacuum, where the artist's presence is thoroughly erased, appearing untouched by any human hand. He was never content with merely projecting nature as it is. To Bouguereau, reality was an imperfect realm, cluttered with impurities and chaotic entropy that obscured the true essence. With his brush, he relentlessly excised every pore, wrinkle, and trace of agony from reality. This is not mere depiction, but an aesthetic purge aimed at restoring the Platonic ideal. He did not paint flesh instead. He engineered the most noble, immaterial surface that the very concept of flesh could attain. This obsessive smoothness is his declaration of war against time. It is the permanent isolation of his subjects from the biological fate of decay and extinction. In doing so, Bouguereau constructed a sterile sanctuary, forever shielded from the weathering of time. Through this 9-minute journey, we will witness how a painter quelled the universe's disorder with his intellect to complete a masterpiece of taxidermied eternity. On Bouguereau's canvas, the human body is no longer a biological entity. It is a mechanical blueprint where gravity, tension, and classical proportion converge at a perfect 0 point. Before painting his subjects, he first established the geometric coordinates of the space they would occupy. The bending of limbs and muscle contractions are not expressions of emotion, but are dictated by mathematical necessity to maintain the balance of the entire composition. Here the body is reborn not as a product of nature, but as a plastic structure forged by a strictly controlled intellect. Here we witness Bouguereau's obsessive fastidiousness. He was like a high priest devoted to the discipline of anatomy. The skeletal structure and muscular movements hidden beneath the skin are bound by a plastic dogma that allows not a single inch of error. While ordinary painters choose anatomical deviations for the sake of vitality, Bouguereau instead pushed those rules to their limits, achieving a motionless perfection that transcends reality. It is not a tribute to living flesh, but a process of stripping away chaotic life to instill an immortal norm in its place. The sublimity of proportion realized by Bouguereau instantly dominates the viewer's retina. The brain misinterprets this inexplicable intellectual comfort as beauty, but in fact, it is a surrender to absolute order. He was a designer who translated the classical grammar of the golden ratio into a modern language. Every curve born from his pen is a fragment of universal order. Now we must stop the play of the senses and ask, are we looking at a goddess or a mathematical idea embodied within the space of the canvas? In Bouguereau's frames, the skin is not an opaque outer layer. It is a translucent organic medium that absorbs, refracts, and scatters light from within. He did not merely apply colour, he precisely simulated the optical phenomena that occur as light passes through the material of skin. The logic of subsurface scattering, used in modern digital graphics to create virtual humans, was already perfected by him in the 19th century through the medium of oil paint. Here the flesh acquires a porcelain-like purity, manifesting an immaterial elegance that real human bodies can never attain. On his canvas, light is more than a means of illumination. It functions as a metaphysical tool that ultimately defines the form. Bouguereau mathematically calculated and arranged the density of shadows based on the position and intensity of light sources. The seamless gradients, devoid of brushstrokes, aim for an optical consistency that leaves no room for the artist's emotion to intervene. This is a realm of simulation that transcends the boundaries of mimesis. Bouguereau was not merely a painter with a brush, but a classical programmer who engineered the path of light upon the virtual space of the canvas. This obsessively perfect optical design triggers a fatal illusion upon the viewer's retina. This hyper-reality, more real than reality itself, yet impossible in existence, grants us a sense of intellectual vertigo. The optical purity Bouguereau pursued was not an act of worship toward nature, but a manifestation of an arrogant will to construct a perfect virtual world that surpasses nature. Before this dazzling fiction he designed, we now stand witness to the majesty of a virtuality more noble than the truth. We now witness a strange fracture appearing in the sterile citadel constructed by Bouguereau. It is the antithesis of the order and harmony he defended his entire life, the critical point known as hell. While for most artists, hell signifies the loss of reason and the eruption of disorder, for Bouguereau, it is a metaphysical laboratory to measure the endurance of his own aesthetic discipline. He never ceases his arrogant attempt to bring even the most primal human fears under his absolute control. Even passion under Bouguereau's fingertips becomes an exquisite structure. The collision of two entangled bodies is not an outpouring of emotion, but a mechanical sculpture, engineered within the physical limits of the human frame. The tension in the bulging calves and trapezius muscles is not a scream, but the product of mathematical tension applied to maintain perfect proportion. Instead of depicting pain, he coldly calculated how the energy of suffering deforms the geometric structure of the body. This is an intellectual violence that forcibly displaces pathos with the reign of logos. Even in this scene of pandemonium, Bouguereau's brush does not tremble in the slightest. He incorporates even the flames of hell into his plastic dogma, modulating chaotic entropy into a part of the classical hierarchy. This is the most magnificent victory cry of an intellect that refuses to surrender to chaos. Through the cold, rigid discipline remaining where vitality was excised, he elevates even the ugliest human instincts to the realm of the intellectual sublime. Hell is nothing more than an aesthetic colony conquered by his hand. As the retina of history became enchanted by the fleeting waves of Impressionism, Bouguereau stood alone defending the citadel of classicism. Critics mocked his flawlessness as dead art, and the era began to indulge in the raw truths of visible brushstrokes. Yet he willingly embraced this discord with his time. For him, who despised the volatility of fleeting impressions, art was the task of permanently preserving an unchanging, absolute reality. The flawless bodies he left behind now gaze back at us from the cold silence of museums. By evaporating vitality, he gained a taxidermied idea, and in exchange he achieved an incorruptible aesthetic immortality. Though we cannot feel human warmth within his canvases, we stand at the loftiest peak that order can ever reach. It is the product of a painter's stubborn and solitary conviction that a beautiful fiction can redeem humanity more profoundly than an ugly truth. Bouguereau's enamel-like silence poses a question to us today. Will you settle for the chaotic truth of a moment, or will you worship an eternally unshakable, noble fiction? He was a man who rejected a disordered world to render his own universe upon the canvas, the last, and yet the first, architect of virtual reality.